car, handcuffed. And that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and he died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
I can't get it. And I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun and nobody knows who's in charge. Did anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.
Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And I hope you missed Revolution Radio last night. I know IDVOX wasn't on, but we're here. We're here. Don't worry about it. We didn't take the whole week off. But we did. Daryl took a little break. I'm telling you, producing these podcasts, everybody, ain't as easy as it looks. Trust me. It's not just me hopping on a microphone once a week for an hour and talking to y'all. Although I will tell you that thanks to our staff and your donations, it's starting to come to that, which is what I always hoped for Revolution Radio. I wanted it to be something that a lot of people contributed to, and it's becoming a little bit better at that every day. But we definitely still have work to do. I definitely still have personal, work to do and organizing to do. And I do as much as I can. So please help me out. You know what I'm saying? Just if you can make a donation. The website's down, so you can't go to the website. That's only for our live streamers. If you're listening to the podcast, the website's back up. So don't disregard all of this nonsense. I am sorry to say that just before I tuned into the show, our crack staff at Revolution Radio let me know that the website's down, but that's, of course, my responsibility. And since I have a show to do, I'm hopping here to talk to you all. But that doesn't mean you can't donate. You can find us on PayPal. You can find us on Cash App. Cash App symbol NJRevRad. You can find us on Venmo at RevRadNat. And you can find us on PayPal. And if you're on the live stream right now, that crack staff is posting the links where you can donate. So please help us out here. That money helps. And like I said, this company's not just, one person anymore. We've got multiple shows. And if you only have been tuning in to NJR Live, you got to check out the IDVOX report, which comes on every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. We've had some great musical guests, some people from the world of entertainment, anti-fascist activists. One of our favorite things to talk about is the Antifa Navy, which is a paddle boat and a few people with flags, which is just a wonderful display of spirit that happened as they protested Tennessee. The clip will live on in infamy. Let me just put it that way, and I'm going to leave you to search the internets to find the Antifa Navy, which of course our good friend Beth Foster it was a part of. There hasn't been a bad show yet of the IDVOX report. So I encourage you to tune in. They took a week off, but they'll be back strong next week. And we're here this week for what's one of our more current topic type discussions. And we're going to talk with our good friend Jennifer Lewinski out of Asbury Park, New Jersey, my home state, where I have had personal interactions with the pigs there. It's an experience. Let's just put it that way. Going to Asbury Park, New Jersey, and trying to deal with the police, as it is in a lot of parts of this country. And often we've been looking to politicians to deal with these problems for us. Although, rarely do they really provide solutions. I mean, right? Oh, I think some of the problem, and I noticed this because I posted a little meme about AOC and I made fun of her. I said the meme said that I posted. that she's one of the waitresses in history that bring nothing to the table. And I took some slack from some weird liberal culty people who can't seem to get it into their head that, I don't know, maybe she's not the savior of all mankind, but this isn't new. And before I get it, I guess before I get into this whole discussion about today's politics and critical race theory, I think it's important that we understand what politics is really about. I want to thank this guy, Mike Duncan. I've never met him before, but he has spent years of his life doing a podcast called The History of Rome and another podcast, Revolutions. And I've been binge listening to him. I've probably taken in a little over 200 hours of his podcasts in the last 2 or 3 months. And it's been an interesting trip down history lane, if you will. Studying Roman history gave me like a lot of perspective on how Western society has developed into what we are dealing with today. Studying the American and French revolutions have given me a little more hope. I know there's this cynical eye that certainly is a leftist and somebody who stands against capitalism. I don't take a positive view of American history, particularly with our treatment of indigenous peoples and people who aren't basically white male. But it's been hard for me to kind of be as cynical as I like to be, because in both the American and French revolutions, there were people and there were efforts put forth to liberate people from oppression, including abolitionists, in this country who were working against slavery at that time. When slavery was a legal institution, as far as, you could argue, of course, it's legal today in the prison system, but more widespread through the South during that time. And during the French Revolution, I think it would be very cynical of a Marxist to not, look at the development of the French Revolution and look at the terminology and the study and the philosophy that came out of it that ultimately led to Marx's writings and communist revolutions across Europe and eventually across the world. But in all these politics, in all these different kinds of politics, whether it be this Roman Empire system, the feudal system that developed under it, or under the French Revolution, where you had an aristocracy taken over by people claiming to be proletarian representatives, it never seemed to me that it was about policy. It never seemed to me that any of this was about the grain shipments. It wasn't about the shortage of, land for this or that tribe. I think a lot of history is made out to be scarcity of resources driving actions of people. And certainly I think that has to play a part in it. The economics of the time drives people to war, and many, many wars have been fought in the course of human history, whose justification was straight up money. I mean, not even secret. I guess we try to cover it up now by talking about freedom and spreading freedom by bombing people and shit like that. But there's been plenty of times throughout the course of human history where the argument was made, it'll just be good business. It'll be good for us to take over this port, take over this land and own that economy so we can have that money and that wealth and those resources for ourselves. But it's never been about that, actually. You can look at Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, and Diocletian as great Roman emperors. They are thought of as great Roman emperors, even though they ruled over an extraordinarily disgusting society. But their contributions to the advancement of society and the advancement of these kind of political circles, can't be taken away. And especially Diocletian, who basically came up with tax codes, who basically decided a way to tax and effectively organize an economic structure for modern societies that's still used today. But none of them stayed in power. Caesar Augustus was murdered. Julius Caesar got stabbed by all his buddies. And Diocletian, even though he lived to retire, he watched everything that he ever built in those 4 years of retirement before he died. Everything that he ever built got torn down. His empire got torn in two. There was never a Roman emperor after Diocletian. So basically, his work was all for naught. Why did all that happen, right? Because it was his policy bad? No, Diocletian made the Roman Empire like 10 times as rich as it was when he started. It wasn't about money, which is a principal driving force of society. No, it was about somebody else's wife wanted to bang his. Or somebody else's cousin wanted to get in on this power circle, and there was a whole bunch of petty bullshit going on behind the scenes. Julius Caesar was a popular emperor. He was mourned. So why does his own Senate stab him to death? Because they wanted the power. Because his daughters were marrying off to the wrong people. Or his sons weren't thought to be good heirs. It wasn't about policy. It wasn't about poverty. It wasn't about grain shipments. It wasn't about war. It wasn't about nothing but petty ass politics. So let me get back to the dipshits that are giving me shit about AOC on that meme. Who gives a fuck about AOC? Nobody. You do because you're a fucking lunatic. There's actual waiters out there starving that need policy passed by that dipshit you're defending. And you're more worried about me getting at AOC. It's the same thing as a cult of personality. We always, throughout the course of human history, have always latched onto people more than policy. It's not our perspective. And if you want to look at these disasters of societies like the Roman Empire, they were more into drama and spectacle than they were into actual politics, even though they're known for their continuation of Greek democracy to some degree in their early senatorial days, which eventually falls apart into an empire. Even though they're known for some of that, these petty politics drags them away from that development of Greek democracy and drags them back down into the mire of warfare and slavery and acceptance of pedophilia and all kinds of fucked up shit that societies really, really, really shouldn't be accepting. I'm not an anarchist. I think we have to have some boundaries because Jesus Christ. And all you got to do to know that we have to have some boundaries is study Roman history. We are not to be trusted. We're just not to be trusted as a species yet without some structure. But, I think that, what I've always tried to do, honestly, throughout my career, and I've had these discussions both at, in lobbying work and working in state houses, but also in grievance meetings and things at smaller levels where I've tried to, and it's way more difficult than you would think it would be. I mean, if you're talking about a pay raise for thousands of people, right, in a union negotiating, you really shouldn't be talking about whether Pete and Sam get along with this boss or that boss. But let me tell you, you get drugged into those conversations constantly, and it distracts. And it distracts from the greater good. That's the problem. And that's why I'm pissed off tonight, because I'm tired of petty politics and I'm tired of people defending AOC rather than advocating for a Green New Deal, because I haven't heard her say shit about that since she walked into Nancy Pelosi's office for about 5 minutes and protested. That was the last time I saw AOC alive. I don't know if anybody else has spotted her doing anything besides tweeting favorite things about Mama Bear and Joe Biden. But hey, maybe you pay attention to her Twitter better than I do. Probably. Almost definitely. So I'm going to try to pivot now. I told my guest tonight I wasn't going to have a good segue, and there's my segue. So I'm going to bring in Jennifer Lewinski from... It's not bad, right?
You did not lie.
It was...
Honesty matters.
It's a bit of a tough pivot, but I don't have a co-host tonight. So sometimes I'll bounce some things off a co-host or we do a commercial or whatever, but I'm going to jump right into it. So that's the best thing. But thank you very much for joining us. You're I've lost count of your number of appearances on both, back in the day, New Jersey Revolution Radio, but we always appreciate steady comments.
I'm here. This is fun. I like the fun part. This is the fun part of activism. The answer 2,000 emails bullshit part. Somebody else can have that.
That's why I need your donations to pay staff here at Revolution Radio. How you doing that? Those days might be a little behind me. I do. I mean, we don't get so many messages, so I do see all your messages, but maybe someday.
One of these days.
So what kind of emails are you getting today? Let me before we get into this subject, because we're going to talk a little bit about critical race theory and stuff tonight. But maybe let's talk a little bit about what are those current emails telling you nowadays? Like,
A lot of people are looking to volunteer for our community safety units. We're organizing alternatives to police, and we're doing trainings in de-escalation and mental health crisis intervention and all of those sorts of things. So people don't have to call the police. You can call your neighbors. And we are not required reporters, and you don't have to worry about DIFUS, and you don't have to worry about entering into the system. Somebody can help you come de-escalate your conflict and not fuck your entire life. That's what we're working on right now.
It's important work. We're gonna come back
and
to
we
that.
won't shoot you.
There you go. Isn't that nice?
Isn't that an idea?
So we're going to get back to that, because I definitely want you to plug in. I know you have some events and some supporting work that people can do, but I guess, when I reached out to you, we were talking about some hot topics, and you brought up mental health. And what I have noticed recently in the news, that a bunch of mentally ill people are passing laws to stop teachers from teaching history, essentially. The discussion of critical race theory has entered into our conversation, and why it's a discussion is kind of odd. Before we even get started, I just want to confirm with you the definition of critical race theory, because I think that's like the most important thing. Because what I'm seeing right now is such a it's like you just, the people defining critical race theory on the other side of this argument are out of their goddamn minds. So I just want to be clear that my understanding of the definition of critical race theory is simply discussing history through the lens of somebody who is not of your origin, who's not of your race. And that can be extended, of course, to maybe not your background or gender or whatever, but that specifically with race theory. And it's also grounded in some law and some older stuff. So that's all it is. And so if you talk about American history, the context of slavery and what it meant to be black is just a lens that I don't have because I'm a white dude.
Right.
That sounds normal, reasonable, and so what's
also
why?
It's giving voice to the fact that racism is systemic, right? That the reason that white cisgender men have all the power is by design, and they don't want people to know that. Because if people figure that out in a real way, like what's built into current curriculum is cognitive dissonance and learning how to sit still for 8 hours so that you can go to work and make money for someone else. So they don't want to detract from that and give us the information that we might need to burn this motherfucker down. I'm sorry. Am I cursing too much?
Not enough.
When you're talking about burning it down, I feel like you have to curse.
Now I can attest to having been educated in an all white school system, and I never learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre until kind of recently, honestly, within the last 10 years of my life, maybe even as a liberal lefty in the union movement, didn't really know until very recently. And it's kind of interesting that you have these competing movements, one grounded in fact and history, and the other grounded in complete lunacy. And they're both titled after years. The 1619 Project is what the New York Times, I believe, put together this project, and it's referring to the first year that African slaves were brought over to this continent, and that is in competition with Donald Trump's 1776 Project, which was thrown out the window as soon as the Biden administration came in, which had no academic or scholarly citations in it whatsoever, was not written by historians. It's something that somebody found somewhere and put forward. So these are the two kind of ideals. Do you paint it as these two competing histories, or do you think it's more complex than that? Is it just simply truth versus idiocy, or do we really need to have a discussion about what's being taught in schools?
I mean, we definitely need to have a discussion about what's being taught in schools and why it's being taught in schools, right? Like, we are taught to not question from such an early age that by the time we're adults and we start to learn critical race theory, which you do whether or not you want it, you start to learn critical race theory as an adult, right? You get information that you were never given before. And either you believe it or you don't, but we were taught to dismiss and and allow lies to be sort of planted, right? So in kindergarten, you learn the Thanksgiving story, and everybody sat down and had turkey and corn and lived happily ever after. And then 3 years later, they're like, oh yeah, and Trail of Tears. And you're like, okay. And at no point does anybody go, excuse me, you lied. You are a liar. Why did you tell me the Thanksgiving thing? Nobody does that, because by the time we're in third grade, we're so used to being given alternative ideas that completely conflict what we've already learned, and we're just supposed to accept it and move on. So how then do you take someone who's in college, even high school, in high school or college, and then try to give them all of this information, whether it's true or not? What the information that you're going to take at that point is the information that's convenient to you, that's going to support your lifestyle, that's going to make you feel comfortable, because that's what we have learned to do. We have learned to hi baby.
Hey, is my boy. That's Brian Jr. And I think do you need to get your PJs, buddy? Yeah. There are pajama drawers behind us here at Revolution Radio Studios. So he's gonna do that. What you're talking about is what I'm seeing very much reflected in the grown-up conversation with air quotes going all around it, right? in our political, but it's this kind of historical sensitive touch. Like, we go touchy-feely. We want to teach American history, and I remember like learning that Native Americans and indigenous people were here, and we kind of weren't that nice to them, and they had to move out because we were but it was never hard truth. And what I think people are missing with critical race theory is it takes away a lot of these conflicts that will plague you if you're getting an American education, because we do we mention that there were people here, we mention that we were at war with them, but we don't really get into the lasting psychological effects, the trauma of war, what it really means to exterminate an entire race of people, and what that makes us as white people viewed, and that lack of understanding melts away when you start to be able to see it through somebody else's eyes. But we can't.
I would argue that we don't teach American history. We teach white supremacy. What we learn in school is white supremacy. It is not history at all, because I don't know how long I believed that the Wild Wild West was empty. Like, I had this picture in my head of like Little House on the Prairie. There was whole communities of people living their lives all across the country. And what I was taught, what I learned, what I understood until I was well into my 20s was that it was empty, and they traversed, and there was nothing there, and they died, and all of the things, and they were so heroic for making it to the other end to get the money. So we're taught white supremacy and capitalism. We're definitely not taught history by any stretch of the imagination. We call it history because it sounds good. Like, other places teach kids history.
I mean, I'll say it is history. This is a white supremacist nation. I mean, we were founded, with a white supremacist ideal. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't separate them. I think white supremacy is a part of our history, and it's a pretty big part of our history.
Well, I think it's important to separate it, because the argument is right between the 1618 project that is giving us this realistic lens, right? That's giving us this holistic picture, and the alternative, which is not a holistic picture. And the reason that the alternative is so acceptable is because white supremacy is so ingrained, right? So you can't call it history if it's actually not giving you a holistic picture.
That's true.
Like, the history that we know about other countries is not even accurate. As far as like in American education, we don't even get accurate information about what is going on outside the bubble. We have no idea what other countries do, what they look like, where they are. I had a kid in college tell me that Pakistan was in Africa. They don't know things. Like, the kids don't know the things, and we don't want them to know the things. We want them to sit down and work and make money for someone else.
So there's a couple different angles which I've taken in on this, and one is, you know, the social justice angle, which is obvious because the ultimate effect is detrimental to everybody. I mean, ultimately, we're not creating a more just and reverent society. So, you know, I think that's big. But there's the political and also the educators aspect. And I don't have a teacher, you know, a public educator with me tonight, but I've got a lot of comrades that do, and I've had 5 children in public education. So that's the perspective I bring it with, and a lot of union contacts and all that. But let's talk about maybe them first before we get into the doofuses in Congress, which becomes an entertaining conversation at times. But educators are now being put in a place of honestly teaching lies. And you're looking at 12 states right now, including Florida, which wants to put forth a $17 million budget to combat critical race theory. Okay, your tax dollars, Floridians.
Always Florida.
The wang. I've got some people that I love very much in Florida. I mean, we're in New Jersey, so that's where people go to die from here.
It is. I have people that I love in Florida also, but then also, why is Florida? I don't understand. It's the worst.
It's the wang of America.
Well.
Please don't.
Whatever.
Our editorial board members in Florida. I got to be careful of that. You're going to watch me tiptoe around this subject. Here comes Brian's liberals.
The difference between Florida and hell is rain.
There's a picture of a lady with a baby on the floor while she pours herself a Slurpee going around the internet. I don't know if you've seen this. And one of the best comments on the thread is, "Where in Florida is this?"
It's honestly, every time something ridiculous happens, you just expect it to be in Florida.
I'm sorry.
Somebody robs a Burger King naked. It was in Florida.
You do it to yourself by having. So you know you have this. Florida is just one of 12 states. All right, they're just the ones putting forth $17 million. But educators are now being put in a place where they're fighting with the government or their superintendents or their community members who are getting riled up by Trump, and they're still out there doing dumb shit. But educators now being in a place to ask to be liars, to sit in front of a class and tell a version of history that is not true. And if you're a dedicated educator, they care a lot. I mean, I rarely meet a teacher that doesn't care. And I hate hearing people criticize teachers, say they don't care or whatever, because I've just never met one that doesn't care.
Nobody signs up to make $35,000
right?
To pay their own money for tissues for your snot-nosed brats because they don't want to. That doesn't make any sense.
Now being used as political pawns, always being used as political pawns, but now being basically having legislation passed to make you a liar, adds another pressure, takes people out of the ranks of educators, leaves us with a glut of talent in that very important profession. I mean, the ripple effects of what's going on right now. Think about I've heard several campaigns out there. We need more African-American educators. We need more Black men teachers. We need more, a representation in our schools of a diverse nation, and think about putting these laws forward, and you're a young man or woman or somebody in high school considering going to college to become a teacher. This is not going to help the situation. So there's this ripple effect. There's this snowball effect. What alternatives are out there? That's I'm getting to my question. Sometimes I'm long-winded, but
I mean,
what are the alternatives out there for an educator that wants to tell the truth to their students?
I mean, there are some really cool ideas floating around that make me really happy. Like, one of my favorite little people goes to forest school, and they literally just have open air education, and they learn about foraging and hanging out in the woods and like what plants not to touch and eat. And every once in a while they sit down and read something or write something or do some math that actually applies to the real world that we live in. And that's dope. So we have those movements. Anywhere you find radicals, you find something good happening, right? So like things are happening. But also my son, who is a Black man, obviously, was a teacher. And he went in with idealism. He ended up in a charter school, which he didn't want to do because, the controversy, but he had to leave because he just kept fighting with the administration.
Was it the curriculum, or was it the atmosphere, or was it a combination?
It was the curriculum. It was the atmosphere. It was the fact that he wasn't allowed to talk about the systemic reasons for why all of these kids were smashed into this ridiculous charter school that was across the street from another charter school that had more money and less Black people. And like, just like, he wasn't allowed to talk about the systems in place that put them in the situations that they're in. And what am I here for if I'm not here to actually give them information that will help them in their future? And it was too frustrating for him to stay. And it broke his heart to leave the kids. He loved the kids, but there's that push and pull, right? I love the kids, but if I'm here and I'm doing what I have to do to keep my job, I'm not doing anything good for these kids that I love. So Black male teachers are not going to stay if I can't tell them what I know about why they are oppressed, about why the system is the way that it is, because that's what we're not supposed to talk about, even in a charter school where the curriculum is far more open than it is in public school, but it's also decided upon by whoever owns the school, and school for profit is a whole other conversation, but it definitely leaves more room for curriculum altering.
I think it plays a lot into the conversation because of the resources available to white and affluent communities, which are not available in more urban communities. And so when and the bottom line is, so let's just say I am a douchebag with not much intelligence, and I don't want my children taught critical race theory, but I happen to be white, which is enough to make a decent living in this country sometimes. So I can send my kids to a private school where that curriculum is taught. Whereas you, Jennifer, who were being subjected to the will of powerful white people in states like the Wang of America, you either have these choices of public schools or underfunded charter schools and a number of, because our schooling is still so segregated. So it plays very much into the conversation when we're passing legislation, which I'll get into the conversations that I've heard from our politicians as they try to defend this. But, it's being passed by these idiots who I've been listening to. And I want to talk to these mental midgets just for a quick second, because there's a Facebook page that every time it comes on my feed, I just start to like roll over, because it's just nothing but a bunch of racist boomer Trumpers who are mad about everything in their own imaginations. And lately this conversation has turned a little more serious for me, because they're talking about going and protesting the Board of Education. And I recently heard a friend of mine was attacked in that town for, in what seems to be a racial incident. So I'm going to leave it at that for now, but more on that maybe next week as I learn more. So, I'm seeing this group of complete idiots, to whine and cry about how they don't want to be made to feel like they're racist. If a curriculum is making you feel like you are racist, it is not the curriculum making you feel racist. If something's touching on you that makes you feel guilty about the color of your skin, maybe it's best you confront that thing and determine why you have that guilty feeling, and not try to stop people from bringing it up so that you can be more psychologically comfortable. And that's absolutely what's going on. And to see grown men in their 60s and 70s act like such little babies, especially after all this crying about cancel culture and how everybody's getting canceled, now to whine about hearing the racist past of our country, it's psychological. It really is, this idea that we have to stay comfortable. But it's okay to be uncomfortable if that's growth.
You're actually better off being uncomfortable, right? Comfortable spaces never give you change. They never give you growth. And people, you know what? Talking about cancel culture, there's a thing today, and it was something super stupid. Like, there was a think piece. Somebody wrote a think piece about Beauty and the Beast. Or no, not Beauty and the Beast. Snow White. Yeah, Snow White. And how the kiss that woke her up was not consensual and therefore inappropriate. And everybody's like, oh, well, what are you going to do? You're going to go back and change everything? Well, have you ever read the Grimm's version of Snow White? We already did change it, so why can't we change it again? It's perfectly reasonable to change things that no longer fit in what we want our culture to be. That's what the fuck it's for. That's what we're supposed to do. When you know better, you do better. And that's the problem. They don't want us to know better, because when you know better, you do better. That's what Tulsa was. People knew better. They figured out capitalism. They figured out how it worked. They figured out how to make it work for them. And they built their own shit. You don't want us where you are, then we'll build our own. And they couldn't stand it. So they blew it off the planet because they don't want us to know better, so that we can't do better, because then they will lose power. Or their own perceived power, because as far as they're concerned, money is power. When people learn that money is not in fact power, that people power is power, and that we can spread wealth and share wealth and have what we need without making shit tons of money, then the whole system will turn on its head. But nobody's going to learn that with the current curriculum. So we can't change it. We can't change it, because then fucking Jim Bob won't be able to control his employees anymore with their $8 an hour.
I think boiling it down right there, what you just did is so important to people understanding, because I think lefties have a tendency to talk in broad strokes. We tend to, where I was critical of not talking about policy in my opening about general, I think times, and we don't get down to the nitty gritty of what goes on in our society on a daily basis. And so we don't feel like we can take any actions against what's going on. But it is that boss being a douchebag to you, or, that politician in your area, those small little kind of interactions that add up to what society is, right? So if we have a society with less douchebag bosses, you have a society that's a little better, right? I mean...
Right. The political is, in fact, personal. And for whatever reason, people just... Well, not for whatever reason, because of the way that we're educated, people default to an authority figure.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, there is no authority on right and wrong. That's not a thing. So you knew what was right and wrong when you were 7 or 8 years old. And that is the best advice I can ever give anyone, is to default to your 8-year-old self. When you learned about the Holocaust, when you learned about the Trail of Tears, and you were like, oh my God, if I was there, I wouldn't have let that happen. If I was there, that's what you think, right? When you're a little kid, you're like, I would never let that happen to my friends. That's crazy. That's the person that you need to hold yourself accountable to for your entire life. And we can change the world individually. If you hold yourself accountable to that 8-year-old kid that read about the Trail of Tears and was pissed off because, first of all, they lied to me. And second of all, why did we kill off all these people? Where are they now? Why don't we know any indigenous people? Because we murdered them all. Like, when you learn about those things and you have that outrage, you are also at the same time learning the cognitive dissonance to dismiss that outrage as you get older, which is why people move further and further to the right as they get older in general. I moved further and further left. The more that I learned, the more pissed off I became, and the more ready to light stuff on fire I still become. I still learn things that piss me off every day. And on some level, that's what critical race theory is. I mean, at the moment, critical race theory is like an inaccessible academic track in university that is written by privileged people for privileged people about people with no privilege, who then come out of school and think that they can teach people of color what oppression is. So right now, critical race theory is not working, but that's because we have education for profit. when education becomes accessible, critical race theory will be amazing. Accessibility is a huge problem at this point right now.
Let's get there. And I do want to talk a little bit about your work against the police, because hating on police is one of my favorite things to do. So we'll get to that. But before we do, I do want to kind of put a little bit of a bow on this, because where we go from here, we're at an important time. This is not an academic discussion, pardon the pun. This is a real-time situation. As I mentioned, 12 states, plus there's a discussion going on with federal legislation. And of course, it's not going to pass with, I think, I'm not going to give Democrats any praise, but I don't think it has a chance of passing with who's in power right now. However, with who's in power right now might change in a year and a half or so. So this is an ongoing discussion, and it's important, I think, to have conversations with people, to be out there in the streets. Do you know of any organizations or movements or things that people should do? Personally, as a parent, I'd be talking to my kids. Honestly, like when my kids come home from school, I'm a guy that sends my kids to public school. I wish public schools were better, but I always appreciated, some of the aspects of it, and just don't have the time and energy to educate 5 boys. But like, that's my suggestion to people: is talk to your kids, find out what they're learning from your children, and then start to address it. What advice can you give to people as they keep an eye on the situation?
Honestly, I can only look from the mistakes that I made, right? My kids are adults now, and I had the option as a very, very, very young mother, right? So I was 20 when my son started kindergarten, and I had 2 other kids, right? I was pregnant and I had another kid. So my kids were in school when I was very young, and my option was Asbury School, which was wildly underfunded, and just the school board was corrupt and the whole system was complete and utter trash. Or I could take them to a school that was a couple of towns over, that was all white, and they were the only Black kids, but it was a public school that gave them a private school education for free. And I chose the latter. Right. So either they got to live in white supremacy and their own personal oppression, right, and being fetishized and all the things that they had to go through, being the only Black kids in the school, or they had to live under the system of white supremacy that was trashing the school that they would have gone to otherwise. So I had to make that choice. But the one thing that I wish I knew then that I know now is that there is an opt-out of the state test movement everywhere in the country. You can find them everywhere. And if we can build the people power to opt out of standardized testing, will change what funds schools. And when you move the funding, you can move everything else that happens. So we need to really put our energy behind giving, mostly mothers, because it is a bunch of women that are like, no, you're fucking with my kids. Mostly mothers, just like put your energy, even if you don't have the bravery at this point, because they will straight up lie to your face and say like, oh, well, we can't promote your kid, we can't keep them in the system, blah, blah, blah. None of that is true in most places. But educate yourself, find your opt-out movements close to where you are, and take your kids out of the state tests and fuck with their money, hit them in the pockets, because that's how you talk capitalism. You're paraphrasing Big Bill Haywood a little bit there. I don't know if you know, but he said, to make a capitalist bleed, stab him in the wallet. So there you go. That's good advice going forward. We could get into a whole thing about standardized testing. We're not gonna, because we're gonna talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is hating on police. Now, I end every show for the last couple of years now by saying that the police can quit their jobs, and thankfully they're listening. Police are quitting the police force in droves across the country. Recruitment numbers, the New Jersey State Police got like 10% of what they normally get in recruitment numbers. There's definitely a negative side to that, because it's the hardcore Looney Tunes that are still applying because they really, really want to kill Black people.
But the good news is, I think that some of the naive people that get roped into the system, and I've always, look, I don't want to defend police, and I'm not a police defender, but I will say there's people that get into it thinking they're going to be able to do something good and positive for their community and just wind up, it's just not the way it's going to happen. And so, you're making a living that way and the system takes you over. But people are now maybe not going.
Dive into a cesspool, it is what it is.
And I like to think in my own obnoxious way that by repeating that line every night on Wednesdays for the last couple of years, a couple of people have thought before they went and put in that application or went and took the test to be a pig that, wait a second, there's consequences for this. People aren't going to respect me, and they realize I'm a douchebag who really shouldn't be walking around just because I have a small penis. They give me a gun and let me shoot people. That's not, it's not as honorable a profession as it used to be. Now, like I said, there's one problem is some lunatics are going to be applying, and they'll probably hire those lunatics because those are the only people that want to be pigs anymore. The other problem is robbing each other and pillaging and burning down houses and going crazy. I want there to be some kind of alternative to the police. What you got?
So we started a community public safety unit training, and we're training people in de-escalation and mental health crisis, and we're looking to be an alternative to the police, right? So like the first step in abolition is to figure out what to do instead, and what to do instead is to like call your neighbors, to like rely on each other, because most of what police can do, we can do without a gun. We don't need a gun to do 99% of what police do. And if police didn't have guns, most of the rest of people wouldn't either, right? So there's that. So we're modeled after the Cahoots model. And you can look at it. I think it's up on our website now at aptransformativejustice.org.
Can you spell that for our audience real quick on the video? Cahoots movement?
Cahoots, yeah. Cahoots is I think they're the first. It's CAHOOTS.
There you go. Okay, Cahoots, just like it sounds. All right, so like you're in Cahoots.
Yeah,
I got you. Okay.
And they have they actually have funding from their city for community safety units, right? People that go without guns, that have mental health professionals and people trained in de-escalation to like go and be a neighbor instead of like, showing up with a gun,
shooting their dog,
people and making it worse, or shooting someone dead center in the chest, like Hassani Best on August 28th of last year. We still meet at the post office every Friday at 5:30 in Asbury to protest for Hassani Best. We're working on a civilian complaint review board for Asbury. It's looking like it's going to get passed. It's not going to have a tremendous amount of teeth. So we're working with the ACLU and the folks from Newark on that legislation to get subpoena power into a civilian complaint review board so that we can actually get some work done. Because as it stands right now, complaints against police here don't go anywhere. Nothing happens. If you don't have 10 years worth of lawyers and court in you, then it's over before it starts. So
you've got a double-pronged strategy there, and both of them take quite a bit of resources. Like honestly, like you saying that doesn't. I hope our audience and we got a lot of organizers and activists that's like a shit. You're taking on the establishment by trying to, and police review boards have gotten a lot of publicity. There's been some steps forward. Newark made some headway, but you can see. Do you see the difference between trying to take on the establishment and making something happen and just creating something? Because I kind of hear that, like right now you're in conflict with the establishment with this police review board. You got to go up against politicians. You got to go up against the police unions. You got to go up against the pigs themselves and their douchebag little ugly families. So you got all that in your way. But when you're creating, like something that a community needs, there tends to be less resistance until you get to the level of like the Black Panthers, and then they come in and make conflict.
Honestly, if it was up to me, that's where we would have started.
Yeah. You roped into the nonsense like I was for a while.
I want to be Angela Davis in real life so bad, but we live in a very small city, and they would just murder us all and not care. So that won't work here. They know us. They know our kids, our family. Yeah. Because of my big mouth, every time my son comes home, he gets pulled over at least 5, 6, 7 times. He's made it all the way to the county for a taillight that was supposedly out that wasn't out when we looked at the car. Like they come for us. So you certainly have to be, I mean, if you want to live, you have to be careful about what you're doing. If you want to live well, you have to shut up. And I'm willing to, live less than comfortably to do the things. So we scream at the police. Tion has been amazing. Tion Willis is at the post office damn near every Friday. If it's not raining or snowing, Tion is at the post office at 5:30 with the megaphone. And he is yelling about justice for Hassani Best, because literally nothing has happened since that man was murdered in his home. Nothing has happened. So yeah.
We appreciate you bringing it up here, and I know that like we put the hashtag justice for Jameek, even though they're that these things tend to go long periods without any movement, and I can't imagine the heartbreak and the frustration involved with the family and the activists. But by keeping his name out there and by repeating it and just by saying their names, and I know it's a little cliche to say that, but it's meaningful because it keeps their presence alive, and maybe someday it clicks with somebody and something happens that justice appears. I could talk to you all night. I have a lot of fun every time we hang out, and I love it when you show up at Revolution Radio, Jennifer. But we gotta go. We gotta get out of here. But before I go, let's repeat. You have some events coming up in your organizations, and people want to give you money. I know my audience likes to give money to comrades, so please let them know how they can.
aptransformativejustice.org. There is a donate button on our website. You can read all about what we're doing. You can see some of our folks. You can see a really bad video of me trying to explain transformative justice in 5 minutes or less, which is not even possible. You can go on our Instagram, which is Asbury Park TJP, and it'll update you on all of our upcoming events and tell you what our email addresses, so you can shoot me an email and I will send you the event links. On the 24th, we're having a mental health crisis training, responding to mental health crisis. That's on the 24th, I believe, or de-escalation. It's one of the two. Organizers are very disorganized. Forgive me. So we're working. We're plugging forward. We have lots of new folks. There's also a link to our current GoFundMe, which is for insurance, because you can't have community public safety units without insuring everyone that knocks on every door. So because they don't know how to insure us, we don't know how much money we need. So we're trying to raise $10,000 and see where that gets us. And hopefully we'll get there sometime in the next 6 months. And by fall-ish, we should be taking calls and knocking on doors and putting police out of work.
That's what we want to have happen. Thank you so much once again, everybody. Jennifer Lewinski out in Asbury Park, and head down to the post office and support her work and give her some money. She's going to be out there regardless of you being there or not. So it'll just be more fun with you there. Thanks a lot, comrade. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. So thanks a lot once again for joining us here on Wednesday nights. We're here again next Wednesday night and the Wednesday night after that. And then the Tuesday after that, I'm going to be in Edison, New Jersey with Darryl Lamont Jenkins, Christian Perez, and this guy, Peter Jacob, who ran for Congress a little while ago. He's going to talk to us about politics and whatnot. We're also going to talk a little bit more about critical race theory. I think that subject ain't dead yet. Police reform, all that kind of stuff. Education is going to come up. Labor. I mean, who knows? And then, and of course, we're going to have the IDOVOX report. We'll probably, talk about white power movements and what's been going on. If you haven't tuned in, please do. The website's down right now, so my live streaming audience, I'm sorry, but right after I hang up, I'm going to pour a cup of coffee. I'm going to get a little sativa in me. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to get the website fixed before I go to bed tonight, hopefully. So podcast listeners, go to www.njrevolutionradio.com. Please make a donation. And if you're live streaming right now before you go to bed, click one of them donation links. They're on the threads below us. We're on Venmo and we're on PayPal. We're on Action Network, all that kind of stuff. The links are there. And I think an email blast goes out tonight. So if you're on our email list, you should get an email blast. Check your spam folders. I think it goes out at 9 o'clock, 3 minutes from now. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again to Jennifer Lewinski. Thanks to Leah, our writer. Thanks to all our editorial board members. I can't wait to see you live. I am really glad that the apocalypse is winding down. So go get vaccinated, take that mask off. Let's get this revolution back on. So until next week, as Brian Powers, I'll remind everybody that the police can quit their jobs. Good night, everybody.
Thrown against the car, handcuffed, and that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and he died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
And I can't get it. And I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun, and nobody knows who's in charge. Can anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.